Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose tonalist landscape painting on a 7, 8 by 15 piece of Stonehenge 90-pound toned paper. We're going to use 3 pigments: burnt umber, raw umber, and phthalo blue. My neighbor is mowing, so hopefully that doesn't show up in the video, but if it does, I apologize. Just like kind of the sounds from that. And that being said, we're going to dive into it. Now, I don't have anything planned compositionally, and we're going to just kind of go with the flow and move things around. But I did use these 2 pigments yesterday, and I did get a very interesting result. Sorry, these 3 pigments. And while I'm just kind of getting a little bit of an idea of how I want this to grow and to move around and create, I will just say, of course, feel free to follow along. You have my exclusive permission to sign anything whenever you follow along from any of my tutorials, and you have my permission to sell anything whenever you follow along. I want you guys to have fun and have money for art supplies. If you want to support this channel, I have the Patreon and other things linked down below. In fact, I have a little PDF copy of my tabletop book up on the Etsy for like $7. And things like that help put money back into the channel. So thank you for your support, and I have some exclusive content up on the Patreon. All right. That being said, I'm grabbing some of this phthalo blue. Okay. So the paper that I used yesterday was a little bit lighter toned, and I had gotten some nice crisp phthalo blue. Right now I have a mixture of the blue with the umbers. So we're going to go back over that in a bit. It's going to be a little bit more fiddly than the usual fast and loose. But the whole purpose of these is to really kind of learn your pigments, see what they're doing, let them work together or have difficulty with each other, and see what you want to use. Now, throughout a painting, I rarely I barely ever clean off the Hake brush during the actual painting process. So I'm just going to grab a squirrel mop just so we can kind of wash in a little bit of that blue. I may also be picking up a few other colors just that's very close to it on the palette. So if that happens, it's not planned. I'll try to mention it if something else makes its way into it. And that gives us an idea of what the phthalo blue is going to look like on the cleanest part of the paper. If I want to go into this more muddied part, I can go back, since I'm wet and wet, and use the paper towel to lift out. So now that I do that, it's kind of less wet and wet in that spot. It's maybe just a little damp, but whenever I come back in and create washes in that spot, we start re-wetting it. I do want to bring this down amongst this kind of tree line that I have forming. Get this Percy hair out the way. I had to close the art room door yesterday when I was painting. She would not stop climbing all over me and the table. So just putting a little blues interspersed with these ideas of a tree line. Switch back. I try to always bring reflections down into the water. I'm going back and forth with the burnt umber and the raw umber, and just kind of placing it in there, getting an idea of how this edge is going to reflect. I'm not going for perfect reflections, just kind of the idea of a reflection in there. All right, so you have this kind of bank coming down towards us. I'm going to grab some raw umber. With these color combinations, I've been using raw umber as kind of a green, as a cooler color that kind of recedes back into the picture plane. At least that's the goal. I also use it as a darker dark, while the burnt umber, and I'll put out a little bit so you can see, is going to be redder and it's going to be warmer. So just exploring the play between those two. And I could put a little phthalo in there. I was using that to mix with the umbers for a darker dark. I'm looking for the tree line that's going to be exactly opposite this tree line. I think that'll help with perspective, having that same vertical height of the trees, more or less. There could be variation in there. Okay. Working around the image and not staying stagnant in one spot, taking the paper towel and searching in the sky, seeing what we can do. Lifting up some, using the squirrel mop for this. And this sort of kind of comes fiddly, but also a little loose, since I'm trying to get the vague suggestions of changes within this sky. Okay. See where we want to go in the water. I feel like this is just one blob, so I'm going to have to separate those and plan out how that changes. These are the pigments that had dropped on the paper while I was putting out the tubes. Just seeing if I can move them around a little bit, loosen them up. I believe phthalo has a staining ability. Just flattening out the paper a little bit. Okay. Let's see where we're at. Phthalo on the hake. Feeding it into the tree line. Looking for the darks at the base. Grab a little more umber. Mixing it on the paper. Let's see how we want this tree to start looking and what type of detail we want. It'll come out and hang over this water edge. We'll catch some reflection. Let's get some burnt umber. Just putting texture into this bank or kind of field coming towards us. Looking to see what we want to have happen. I think a single mid-ground or foreground tree is going to wind up happening, but I don't know where I want to place it yet. Those reflections along that edge. Okay, so while we're wet and wet, just grabbing some pigment with the number 1, putting some movements throughout. As usual, this should soften and fade and blend in with everything around it, but some of it might show through at the final end of the painting. Just helps give a little bit more vibe to it. I think with this tree mass, I think I want to bring that sky down right here. And you see how we could do that with just lifting with the paper towel. And if we want to, we can just grab that squirrel real quick. And get some color in there. Some of the phthalo blue. Even work a little bit of an opening right there. I think I want to bring it to light. And that'll get fiddled with too. All right. Looking at this bank, the more vertical sides would be darker. So it looks how that's going to go. I'm going to grab phthalo blue with the burnt umber. I'm going to make a dark mix. A bit reflection. I think we're going to lose this into a group of texture, bushes and such. This would be nice to come into a rock shape. So I'm going to grab a card, see if we're damp enough or dry enough for a good scrape, and we are. So we have the rocky edge here. We might have a little bit of rocks on this side too. We wouldn't really see any rocks back here, but we can get just a little idea, see if that comes through. We could scrape in some tree trunks if we want as well, but I think I'm going to avoid that part. Now, paper towel to prepare for some textural ideas in that field coming towards us. Hake with some strong pigments. This is grass coming over. That's going to be the preparation for that. I'm just going to start hiding behind some bushes. Let's get a corner bush coming out here too. Okay. Take a look, see if there's anything we want to mess with before we dry off. Grab a little bit more pigment of the phthalo. All right, I'm gonna pause the camera and hit it with a blow dryer. Okay, now that we've done the dry off, everything's soft, we can go in, we can glaze with color, we can add some texture, we can look for darker tonal values, we can recreate wet and wet areas. There's a lot that we can do. So I have the quill brush right here, Squirrel Mop, and I dipped it in a little bit the phthalo blue just to show how you can wash over these and bring more blue in if you want. Usually I don't fiddle with skies in this fashion, but I feel like this has been helping some. I'm going to pass over pre-existing trees so that I don't create awkward shapes around them. If we want stronger, higher up, we can. Gives us the illusion of all the layers in the skies. And if we want to put it into the water, bring that down as well. And if we want, we could once again start lifting things back if need be. All right, so I'm grabbing the hake brush. I'm looking at the raw umber. I think I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start putting texture in on top of these trees. Now for me, if I'm doing a monochromatic painting, this step usually has a very consistent tone throughout, which is sometimes a hindrance. I'm not sure if there's other ways to control that besides simply coming in and dapping it off. If there was a way to constantly get different variations of water and pigment onto the hake brush during that time period, I'm sure there is, that'd be another way as well. So the closer tree is the one that I'm going to define with this. Same thing with this grouping here, making sure it's tracking across that river or stream. We'll get some dyes there. Looking to let that tree fall a little bit, that foliage kind of spilling out. Now, I've been playing with the back of the brush to scrape a little bit more. Saw that in a David Dunlap oil video. So this is the number 1. Looking to see what we're going to see with this tree coming out. If we go over areas that we already painted just now, that's going to be wet and wet, and it's going to diffuse some. So just be aware of that. I want some effects coming out of these trees too. Trying not to make them all just perfectly vertical, looking to make them all a little slanted, curved, just natural trees. And I could take the Hake brush or any one of the other brushes and put in various textures for this field, for this grass coming towards us. Look into the base of this rock, darken that up, help it sit in place. Idea of bushes, just to frame the piece. This one dried quite soft. The idea of texture in there. Using the back of just any brush. Use the fingernails and other effects. It seems like I want the water to come through here, so let's see where we can bring that with the phthalo blue. Some dot through that bush. Moving horizontal with these marks. In fact, I can grab a little bit of the burnt umber. Start putting a little bit more warmth and life into these. Burnt umber, a little bit, maybe too much warmth, but we'll see. Kind of almost glazing like we did in the sky. And if we want to lift anything up, let's see if I can get it nice and clean. You can wet an area. And pull that up. Looking to just create a little field further back that's catching some light. Hopefully that's a big enough change that you can see that. My paper towel winds up getting soaked, so I'm going to grab another one. I've seen people scrub out objects in paintings, and I've seen it done really good with the Hake brush. I'm just looking for that thin edge of land. I'm going to pull out any little holes in the trees. We're going to see where one would be good. Maybe right in here. Start getting a little water in there. See what we can pull back to. But it does help to kind of clean up those openings. So, I think we'll do a dry off now and see where we're at. I'll pause the camera, hit it with a blow dryer. Okay, so it's pretty dry. I'm gonna grab a mix of the Umber and Phthalo, looking to make a dark. So I'm trying to get as much pigment as possible using the number 1. And the goal here is to use this as like a dark, while also looking for very light, if I can get it, brush strokes to kind of just hit the paper. And it is not wanting to flow for me. I'm not looking for those dots, I'm looking for these guys. Do I not have enough water on it? Sometimes my rigger will miss getting cleaned when I clean my brushes. I make sure I clean them like after every painting, but usually I have all of them in my hand and I'm just running water over them. So it will sometimes get missed. I'm looking for foreground grasses. Just movement in the foreground, these vertical shapes, curved. Then I can introduce them along the water here with taller grass and bring their reflections down. I'm really trying not to be too much of a repetition of the shape. I would like it to just be nice and loose, and maybe little seed pods on the ends. My main thing is I just don't want it to come out too thick. I had to resolve to use more water with these, so less pigment, just to get them to flow better and to get my marks more consistent and less thick. If you want to move any of them around, if they're still wet, you can. You can use this number 1 on the side. And that creates little textured effects. I once watched a gentleman paint a beach once in watercolor, fast and loose, and he put dots out along the beach as it was coming closer and spreading the dots out closer in order to create just kind of a gradient, I guess, along it that almost kind of tracked linear lines. And that's how he had created a sense of depth on the flat beach. And I'm just finding that random texture in general is just helping me a lot more. And somebody might look at this and say, oh, you know, it took a lot of time, but in actuality, we can get a lot done really quick. Pull along that edge right there. Okay, this little tree hole that I made, not too fond of it, so just want to get a little bit of movement in there, so maybe it'll be a little bit lighter, but I just don't like it the way it is. We can look for darks in these trees and emphasize bases and maybe some thicker spots. This is just the mainly phthalo blue, just looking to see where I can play around with that. In fact, go back to the phthalo blue mixed with the burnt umber and using our same type of marks, get some of those shadows and reflections that are darker right on that edge. As per Eric Kopel, I'm trying to do very horizontal 90 degrees to the, I guess it would be 90 degrees to it, just laying right across the water with those land masses, with these lines that I'm creating. A little bit more dark in there. If we want to glaze more warmth over stuff, we can, but there are spots that are wet, so we will have some issues if we do that right now, so we'd have to do a dry off. So looking at it, I think the next logical thing with this color, this Triad, would be adding a fourth color. I think it would be logical to put a yellow in there to just work on that atmospheric perspective of having the yellows kind of get close to us and just create a sense of depth. I'm just taking a little bit of the burnt umber, just glazing it in real quick just to liven up the feeling of the field. So there you have it. I'm going to leave this one here. If you wanted to push this one further, I would play around with stronger phthalo blue in the sky and see how that affects the overall painting. Once again, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and follow. And I will be back with more videos. And I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye.